If you're just joining us here on France 24, you're watching images on the right of your screen there of Nicolas Sarkozy's car just in the distance ahead here of this motorcade that is going through the streets of Paris at the moment. We saw about 5 or 10 minutes ago him leave his home in Paris, heading towards La Santé prison, where he's due to be incarcerated for a sentence of 5 years. On the left of your screen there, you can see images from the prison as well. And we'll talk to our reporter Clovis Casali again there very shortly. Philip, Clovis was talking, though, wasn't he, about these books that he's taking into the prison, also about the fact that he's going to write a book. How long has he got to write this book?
Well, we don't.
5 years is the sentence.
Big question.
But will he really be in jail for 5 years?
No, I think there's pretty much no chance he's going to be in jail for 5 years. But we don't know how long he's going to be in jail for. This is what's going to happen now. You can only file a request to be liberated at early liberation once you go to jail. So that's going to happen today. As soon as he gets behind bars, his lawyers are going to file a request for him to be given early liberation from the prison. That's the first point. That will go to the appeals court, and they will then consider within the next 2 months, judges in the appeals court, whether or not he will be able to be liberated. It probably won't take 2 months for that decision to be made. But if it's a negative decision, then the judges will come back and file another case for him to be given anticipated freedom or early release. If that is the case, then he will be able to be freed immediately. He will just have to hand over all the equipment that he's been given in prison, and then he'll be able to return home to his apartment in the 16th district of Paris. The lawyers are going to repeat the request for him to be given early release. But as I said, that will happen up until the retrial, which is due to take place at the latest by the 25th of March. Why the 25th of March? Because it has to come 6 months after the original verdict on the 25th of September. And that's why Nicolas Sarkozy will find himself back in court again for the retrial between now and the spring. We don't know whether he's going to be liberated between now and then. Will he have time to write this book? We don't know. But he's only allowed to take 3 books into the prison with him. As we heard, the 2 volumes of The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas, and also this biography of Jesus. They have to be paperback books. They're not allowed to take in hardback books. There are a few other strange things that people don't know about prisons in France, is that he won't be able to take his own sheets with him. You have to have the sheets given to you by the prison. He won't be allowed to take a compass in there with him, which I think also is probably a measure of security in case a prisoner manages to escape. But he will be allowed to use a prayer mat if he wants one. And he will be allowed to have a television set, but if he wants to have a television set, he will have to pay €16 a month to be able to watch it. But he will have in the room a fixed line telephone that he will be able to use to contact friends and family when he likes while he's in the prison. So that's what is awaiting Nicolas Sarkozy when he gets to the prison de la Santé. He's almost there now, and it's going to be not a very nice day, as I was saying before, because he's going to have a body search when he gets there, and then be able to then have to wear a prison uniform. And so it's going to be pretty difficult because he'll be locked in that cell 23 hours a day and only have 1 hour when he's let out to walk in this very small courtyard, and he won't have any contact with any other prisoners apart from prison warders who will be there to make sure that he is kept under permanent surveillance in case. In many cases, this is always what happens in prisons to stop any inmate from potentially trying to commit suicide. And Nicolas Sarkozy will receive the same treatment as everybody else. What is different for him, just one last point, is that he is in solitary confinement. This is something quite rare, especially at the prison de la Santé. Just to give you an idea, there are 706 places in this jail, but it has a 191% over rate of more of inmates in there than it should, which means that there are 80 mattresses on the ground where people have to sleep because there are not enough beds. So in a way, Nicolas Sarkozy is quite lucky to have a cell on his own and not have to share with someone or have to sleep on the floor.
Well, let's go straight back to the prison and talk to Clovis Casali, who's joining us from there. Clovis, I don't know whether you can see the first vehicle starting to arrive of that motorcade from where you are, but I'm sure anticipation is building for this arrival.
Indeed, and small crowds gathering here. Dozens of people close to the prison, as close as possible, because the area has been cordoned off, as you can imagine. Heavy police presence. And people from the area, from the neighborhood, and also Parisians in general are coming here, taking a lot of pictures. You've also got people at the balconies just in that building in front of me, trying to get a sight of this historic moment. One person was telling me, I wanted to be here. This is a moment of French history. And of course, you've got some people here who support Nicolas Sarkozy, who believe it's not normal to see a former French president sent to jail, even though he might not spend very long in jail. As we said, his lawyers warned this morning again that they will be filing an official request as soon as Nicolas Sarkozy enters the prison for an early release. And they believe he might be in jail for about 3 weeks, possibly 1 month. So yes, the former French president Nicolas Sarkozy about to arrive at the prison of La Santé. We're here on the left bank, south of the Latin Quarter. This is a prison in Paris. Very unusual to see a prison right on the streets of central Paris. People here gathering, waiting for Nicolas Sarkozy to arrive. And one of his advisors of the former French president telling us that he will be arriving with his head held high. And that's why he's chosen to enter not through a hidden entrance, a side entrance where you usually have deliveries, but through the main gates of the prison of La Santé.
Well, let's bring in as well Andrew Smith now, who's joining us, historian of modern France at Queen Mary University of London. Andrew, great to have you with us as ever here on France 24. I'm sure you're watching and have been watching these images of Nicolas Sarkozy on his way to the prison. The word that I keep hearing Clovis using, that Philip Tell keeps using, Ellen Gainsford, who was at his residence, was using it earlier on, is unprecedented. I mean, it really is unprecedented, this, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is very much a historic day. He is, of course, the fourth French head of state that's been convicted, but every time before, I think we can see something really quite historic. Louis XVI, of course, a rather more severe sentence when he was executed in 1793. Philippe Pétain, sentenced to death and commuted to exile after the liberation. And of course, Jacques Chirac with that 2-year suspended sentence back in 2011. But this is, I think, important because what it shows is this is the hand of justice reaching out and, you know, touching a former president. It shows that abolition of privileges. You know, we go back to 1789 and all the rest, the abolition of privileges. It says that no one is beyond justice. And so I think this is a really important moment that, you know, it might well be unprecedented, but I think it sets important precedents about the need for probity in public office and the ability of, you know, the state to really call people to account. So I think there's some really important elements to that as well.
Andrew, you've been covering French politics for years. I mean, just thinking about Sarkozy as a person, as an individual, I mean, how much of a giant has he been, if you like, in French politics over the last 20 to 50 years?
Nicolas Sarkozy has been so important, I think, in French politics. You know, first of all, as Minister of the Interior, and then, of course, as President. There's a reason, I think, that people come back to him. He, of course, you know, led some of the important responses to the 2008 financial crash. He weathered those storms, but he also set a course in politics, I think, a sort of quite a populist right-wing discourse around law and order, around security. And I think that's why both this is so, in a way, ironic to see him tried and facing justice like this, but also why he's retained such an important kind of conciliatory role in bridging the kind of various tribes of French politics, if you will. He's sought out by people right across the political spectrum. We've seen, of course, important consultations between himself and Emmanuel Macron, who they met just a few days ago. Of course, he met with Sébastien Lecornu before his investment as Prime Minister, first time round. He met, of course, with you know, a litany of different figures from, of course, the centre-right and the kind of the centre. I think that's quite an important element because we'll come back to him. He was, you know, the last of that Gaullist tribe, effectively, to be elected to president, to really win round the French people. And people want to go back and find more of that influence, to understand that touch, especially when we see this, you know, real shift in terms of French popular opinion towards a much more kind of authoritarian stripe in terms of their kind of opinions around security. Of course, a very big opinion poll just done by the Fondation Jean Jaurès the other day about those types of attitudes. So I think there really is something about his understanding of that moment, why people keep coming back to him, and even why we know that Gérard Darmanin will be visiting him in prison, of course, the Minister of Justice. So clearly he holds a sway over French political opinion. And that's because of his own successes, what he represents in terms of his ideology, but also, I think, his persona and his charisma as a man.
Andrew, stay with us. I'm just going to touch base once again with Clovis, who's at the prison there, just for a bit of an update. Clovis, it's a bit difficult to tell from the images we're seeing, but I assume that Nicolas Sarkozy's vehicle was one of those vehicles which went into the prison a short while ago.
Quite possibly. We saw several vehicles enter the main gates of the prison of La Santé here in the southern part of Paris. Everybody here trying to understand really what's just happened. We have onlookers, people, normal citizens here gathered with their cameras, of course, taking pictures, asking us, did he go in? People here know that they're witnessing a historic moment with Nicolas Sarkozy entering jail. The first time a head of state here in France goes to jail since Philippe Pétain, the Maréchal Pétain, remember, Nazi collaborator. Nicolas Sarkozy will be entering, if he hasn't already entered the jail, and we know that he will be going through whatever normal prisoner goes through when they enter the prison of La Santé. He has to give his identity. He goes through a full body search. He is given a pen and paper, a hygiene kit, sheets, a cover, and then Nicolas Sarkozy to go into solitary confinement here at the prison of La Santé. What does that mean? It means he won't be in contact with any other prisoner. This for safety reasons. We are talking here of a former French president. And of course, many people here probably don't really like Nicolas Sarkozy. I'm talking, of course, among the prisoners. So everything needs to be done to ensure his safety. Nicolas Sarkozy will get 3 visits a week at the prison. He will be allowed to go out of his 9 square meter cell twice a day for a 1-hour-long walk, but not around the facility, just in a small courtyard. And regarding the conditions of his detention, he will get the right to have a TV if he pays 16 euros a month. One of his advisors telling us also he will have a radio and he will get to work as soon as he enters his cell. He wants to write a book where he will release his rage, as his lawyers are saying, because Nicolas Sarkozy believes he should not be going to jail today, that he did nothing wrong and that he was wrongly convicted. Nicolas Sarkozy determined to fight this. He said that his career, his life was full of obstacles, of difficult times. This is yet another obstacle, and he will overcome it.
Yeah, I think he can probably afford the 16 euros, Clovis. But, I mean, it's pretty tough, though, isn't it? I mean, he's, as you say, not being given many favours. And he may not meet, of course, other prisoners, but they may well make their voices heard, at least, mightn't they?
Yes, and Nicolas Sarkozy adamant he's not asking for any special arrangements, no favouritism. He wants to be treated nothing more, nothing less than any ordinary citizens. Nicolas Sarkozy feeling that he was unjustly targeted by the judges. And to come back to your question, of course, here at the prison, many inmates don't particularly like Nicolas Sarkozy. Remember, when he was president, he was the president who vowed to act tough on criminals, to act tough on delinquents. That was very much his motto: security before all and fighting criminals by all means. That was what Nicolas Sarkozy stood for, notably when he was French president. What people, notably one of his friends, Patrick Balkany, mayor of Levallois, who was in prison here, what Balkany said is, what's the most difficult here in this prison is the noise. The noise during the day, during the night. Inmates screaming, yelling. Many have mental problems. And that's maybe what Nicolas Sarkozy will be suffering the most from. Those screams, shouts at night. Because yes, life in prison is no easy life. And that's what Nicolas Sarkozy is set to experience. His lawyers believe they'll be able to get him out of this prison in 3 weeks, maybe a month, because yes, they are filing an official request for an early release. This before his appeal is examined by judges.
Well, let's bring back in Andrew Smith once again, historian of modern France at Queen Mary University of London. Andrew, you gave us the highlights, if you like, of Nicolas Sarkozy's career a few minutes ago. Just give us the lowlights, really. I mean, what's gone wrong for him here?
Very much this is the result of a complex case that's been brought against them. The judgment that was published just recently was 400 pages long. It covered 13 defendants and 68 offences. It was an extremely complex case that was all about whether or not Sarkozy had sought illegal campaign funding from Libya for the 2007 presidential campaign. That hinged around the fact that he was convicted of being part of a criminal conspiracy to arrange for funding to be provided from quite murky Libyan sources. We remember, of course, his attempt to recondition Colonel Gaddafi's reputation on the world scene. Of course, after very visible terror attacks, you think, of course, of the Lockerbie bombing, but of course also UTA Flight 722 in 1989, which killed 170 people, including many, many French citizens. Now, the person he was supposedly in touch with was Gaddafi's brother-in-law, Abdallah Senussi, an important figure in that regime and one of the masterminds, effectively, behind that bombing. And that's one of the things I think that was so galling about this corruption trial. This wasn't just murky money. This was murky money coming from a regime which had been complicit in the murder of French citizens in acts of terror. And that's one of the real problems. Sarkozy set himself up as a defender of law and order, of course, famously quipping about, scum, hackai, and, using a cashier kind of power washer to hose down the streets. But in fact, what the courts have said was that some of the murkiest of crimes were taking place in his inner circle. And so that's really what we're seeing here. Now, of course, Sarkozy protests his innocence. We know, of course, that day one, his team will put down those appeals against his imprisonment, likely be heard within 2 months. But we know also the type of book he's going to be writing as well. Look at what he's taken in with him. The Count of Monte Cristo, the central story about Dantes and this kind of, unjust imprisonment. And of course, a biography of Jesus Christ. The idea of this ultimate persecution. We know that Sarkozy is setting himself up as this, martyred figure in the face of judicial favor against him. Now, I think that's what's really dangerous. And that, I think, is, one of the real black marks here. Sarkozy, so long a champion of justice and a sort of populist language around security, is now doing his utmost to really damage the institutions of the judiciary in France. And I think it's a really important point to look at the facts of the case and judicial process. This is not a republic of justice. This is Republican justice. And I think that is a really, really important distinction. This is about an idea that it's not being led by lawyers, but led by courtrooms, by evidence, and by investigations. And it was those courtrooms that found Nicolas Sarkozy guilty of that criminal conspiracy. And that's why he's spending time in jail right now.
And knowing the French political establishment like you do, Andrew, how do you think he'll be received once he comes out? Because that's going to be crucial as well. I mean, obviously, he's no longer president, hasn't been for a long time now, but he's always been one of those figures, if you like, who presidents often talk to. And I'm thinking, obviously, of Emmanuel Macron, but even Francois Hollande as well, if they wanted to talk either to somebody who had a similar view to themselves or perhaps wanted to talk to somebody who had the opposite view. He was often someone that presidents could call on, if you like, couldn't they, to try to resolve disputes or find ways through different policy issues?
He's always been seen as a sort of go-between. You're absolutely right. He's always been seen as someone who can help connect people and put conversations in place. Someone who can bring people from opposite sides of the divide. Now, I think, in honesty, it looks in part that it's not really been damaged, that role. His meeting with Emmanuel Macron 4 days ago, Macron, of course, said, well, he's just meeting, one of his predecessors. It's perfectly normal on a human level. We've seen Gérard Darmanin scheduled to go visit him as well. And, of course, the Magistrates Union has said that's actually quite unhelpful in terms of the independence of the judiciary to have the Minister of Justice going and visiting specially a high-profile prisoner just to make sure they're comfortable in their cell. And I think that's quite a telling moment. You know, Sarkozy maintains, actually, a lot of those consultant positions that he has for very high-profile companies. There were a few that dropped him after the trial, but he's maintained an awful lot of them. He continues to receive quite a big income, of course, from his legal firm that he set up a long time ago. He's registered with the bar, of course. He continues to make a lot of money advising people, connecting together small businesses and the kind of, you know, the big, kind of heights of the French economy. He continues to consult and work closely with people, you know, right across the business world, but also people like Vincent Bolloré, of course, the media tycoon, the right-wing media tycoon. And that, I think, is the thing that remains so important. So, oddly, even as he sleeps in prison tonight, I think that, you know, that landline telephone may well be ringing off the hook. It may well not give him a quiet night as people phone to check up on him, phone to speak to him, phone to see how he's getting on. He may well have some busy visiting hours, not just, of course, from Carla Bruni, his wife, but from many, many supporters right across the political and business world in France. And that, I think, is, you know, a telling that it might well be a fairly soft landing, despite the severity of this prison sentence.
Philip, do you agree with that? I mean, do you think he's going to be, welcomed back into the political community and still have that same influence that he had before?
Well, there's going to be a divide between those who believe that Nicolas Sarkozy is innocent and all of this is a political witch hunt and a judicial witch hunt as well, and that the judicial system has got it out and has had it out for Nicolas Sarkozy for years and has finally got him behind bars. And there are others saying, well, this is correct. If you look at the opinion polls in France, one of the latest ones said that 61% of French people believe that it is correct that Nicolas Sarkozy goes to jail as a result of him being found guilty in this court case. So there is a majority in France of people who believe that Nicolas Sarkozy should be in jail, that he has been correctly found guilty of these charges. But it's true that French presidents have this aura about them, or former French presidents, as people who have contacts around the world, who have their ability to pick up the phone and set up deals, are politically able to advise younger politicians about what to do and what not to do. And all of that remains intact for Nicolas Sarkozy. So whether or not he's guilty, whether or not he spends a long time in jail, whether he's back in his apartment and a free man very, very quickly, his ability to be someone in the background who can offer advice and can pull some deals together will remain intact. So I do agree on that. But I think there will be a greater divide in France between those who believe that he went to jail and that is something that is correct, and others who believe that this was a travesty of justice and he should not be in prison today and he's a victim of a judicial witch hunt.
Let's ask one last question to Andrew Smith. Andrew, I'm sure you've got to leave us soon, but historian of modern France at Queen Mary University of London. Andrew, just sum it up in your words. I mean, we've used that word unprecedented so many times, I can't think of a better one. I mean, it is unprecedented, isn't it, to see a former president of France heading into prison?
I think it really is, and it's one of these things that speaks to the office of the presidency in the Fifth Republic. People look at this as the Republican monarch. You can see those people gathered at the gates, like those who, you know, dipped their hankies in the royal blood in 1793. This seems like a sort of something extraordinary that's occurring. We know this is the normal functioning of justice. People that have 5-year sentences, you know, over 80% of them tend to be arrested and serve time as part of this. We know this is about the normal functioning of justice, the normal procedures, the normal trials that people go through when they are found guilty of these complex cases. But nonetheless, it feels like something has been crossed, a Rubicon has been crossed. And that, I think, is a really important message about probity in politics, about honesty in terms of public affairs, and the idea that public service demands a certain level of conduct. Hopefully, it's a message to people in French politics that public approval of this, of facing justice for crimes committed, that public approval of justice running its course should say to politicians in France that public service is not above the eyes of the law. And I think there is a historic moment here, but also a historic message. And it's one which I hope that many people will hear, to clean up politics, to ensure that people are serving in the interests of the people and not in their own interests. So Nicolas Sarkozy will spend at least tonight in prison. He'll be looking to campaign for his release. He'll be looking to play that narrative of betrayal, the witch hunt and all the rest of it. But I think for most people, they will look at this as being him getting his just deserts. And that will be a story, I think, which will be much more difficult for him to defy.
Andrew, it's been great to have you with us as ever on the programme. Andrew Smith, historian of modern France at Queen Mary University of London. Thanks for being with us. We've been watching those images then of Nicolas Sarkozy as he left just over an hour ago his home and headed towards prison, to the Santé prison in central Paris. Once again, those images from right outside the prison. We're continuing to follow the story for you. Of course, after the break, we'll talk once again to our reporter, Clovis Casali, who's there. We'll also have a bit of a look later on in the hour at somehow the press are reacting to all of this with Alitza Gadiva, and talks as well to our French politics editor, Mark Perelman. All that coming up for you after the break, so do stay with us.